So, in order for us to talk about how to solve absolute value equations, we have to kind of talk about what absolute value means, right? It's a little windy, but it's a good breeze, so we're going to keep those windows open. So, back in whatever grade you first learned about absolute value, your teacher put this up there, and they said, what's the absolute value of -5? And everybody knows 5, right? Okay? However, when the teacher says, okay, what's the absolute value of 5? Almost always kids will say -5 because they think it's the opposite. But you know better than that, right? Because the absolute value of 5 is also 5. Who can explain to me why? You want to shut that door for me? Will you pull the door shut? Ethan.
Because it's not the opposite of the number, it's away.
Perfect. That's the word I was hoping he was going to use, and he did. He said it's not the opposite, although a lot of people think that. The definition of absolute value is the distance away from 0 on a number line. Okay? And the word distance, I want you to underline, and we talked about this year, I feel like, that you can't have, so for example, if I had a kid standing, if I had a number line on my floor, and I had somebody standing at 5 and somebody standing at -5, and I said, hey, how many steps do each of these kids have to take to get to 0? They would both have to take 5 steps. Doesn't matter that this one would go backwards or this one would go forward, they're still 5 steps away. Walking backwards does not undo the distance you traveled, right? So when we look at the word distance, we know that distance can never be negative, okay? Which is why the absolute value of a number will always be positive. Keep that in mind, okay? All right, so that brings me to us starting, and every time we do a new problem, I'm just going to kind of let you know we're starting a new problem with this. So if I were to say, hey guys, what number could I put inside for x that would give me an absolute value of 3, you would say, yeah. And what else would work? 3. So he said x could be 3. It could also be -3. A fancy algebra way to write that, have you ever seen this? Written like that, okay? So when it's written like that, it means that you just write the 3 once and it could be positive or negative, okay? So we kind of understand this concept. This is when we start to apply the algebra and the equation part to it. So if I were to say to you, x plus 3 could equal 8. So if we stop and think about the definition of absolute value, I'm telling you that this expression has to either equal a positive 8 or a -8, right? Because those are the only two numbers that has an absolute value of 8. So one of them is pretty easy to figure out, and the other one, not hard, but it requires a little more thought. So what could the first value of x be in order to make that whole expression 8? 5, right? Because 5 plus 3 will give me 8. Can anybody come up with the second one? Cal? Close, -11, but you had the right idea, yes. So -11, okay? And some of you are kind of looking at that like, how did he know that? Because he knows that if you have a -11 and a positive 3, that would give you a -8, okay? So there's a way around that because they're going to get way harder than that. Even the 2-step equations are going to be. So here, you know how I said, show your work. Like coming off of solving multi-step equations, I feel like some of you who maybe didn't show your work last year are starting to learn the steps and it's becoming clearer. So yes, there is work involved in this, just like there were in the previous section. So watch. First thing you're going to do, because you're going to have 2 answers, 3 and a -3, a positive 5 and a -11. So the first thing you're going to do here in this problem is create 2 equations. Listen when I write them. I'm going to say that this expression inside could equal a positive 8. And this expression inside could also equal a -8. And now I have 2 little mini equations that I have set up. And as soon as I take the time to solve those equations, I'll have my 2 answers, right? So I'm going to subtract 3 here. And that shows me that x can be 5, just like you said. And I'm going to subtract 3 here. And that shows me that x can be -11. So just writing 5 and -11 isn't enough because I'm going to say prove it. And remember on that types of errors I showed you, it said, one of your conceptual errors would be not being able to justify your work. So prove to me that it could be negative 11. Oh, sure, here. Let me set this equation up. So what you are going to learn from absolute value equations is that you will almost always have two answers. Notice that I wrote the word almost. There are going to be times you're not always going to have two answers. There are going to be times you're going to have one. There are going to be times you're going to have none. But for the most part, almost every problem you do should have a positive and a negative, or should have two answers. They may not always be the one positive or one negative. Okay, next problem. Try this on your own. A minus 4 is equal to 6. What are the two values that A could be? To make that a positive 6, to make it a negative 6. Setting up your two equations. And this little 1 and 2 might actually be helpful. It's not necessary, but it might actually be helpful. So take a minute to do that. So you set your two equations up and you say A minus 4 could equal a positive 6, but A minus 4 could also be a negative 6. So now you literally have your two problems. You add 4 here and you get A could be 10 because 10 minus 4 is 6, and you add 4 here, or it could be negative 2. Does that make sense? Okay? Because you know how this works. I start you off with the basic and then we move our way up. So are we okay with this concept? All right, so let's add another problem to it. So let's take this one. 3 plus the absolute value of a number divided by 2 equals 6, okay? So right here is kind of where it starts to involve more steps. And I will tell you, every year, after year after year, for 15 years, the biggest mistake kids make when they are doing absolute value equations is in their head, you can get a drink if you need to, they go right to 1 and 2. And they say 3 plus x over 2 equals positive 6, and 3 plus x over 2 equals negative 6, and that's wrong. Here's why. Because the only thing that can be on one side of the equation, equal sign by itself, is the absolute value and nothing else. I see this right here, right? So this plus 3 means that I'm taking a 3 and adding it to this absolute value. But I can't have it there. So don't go right to your 1, 2 until you take care of, I call cleaning it up. Clean it up. Too messy. I can only have that. That 3's got to go. So after I do that, this plus disappears with it, and you have a number divided by 2 equaling 3. Now my next question is everything cleared out? There's nothing in front of it, nothing behind it. We're good to go. And then and only then are you okay to start your two equations. And then when you do your equations, guys, you get rid of the absolute value because you're now in working with it mode. So x over 2 could be equal to a positive 3, and x divided by 2 could be equal to a negative 3. And those solutions will be your two answers. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2 and say that x could be a positive 6, or x could be a negative 6, which you could write like that. Okay? Make sure you're good with me because I'm going to add another step to it in a minute. Okay? So we have something being added to it, and I want you to see the difference between that problem and this problem right here. And now you see why it's so important to be able to show your work, because there's no way I'm not saying there's no way, but it's way harder for you to look at that and say, what number would go here that would make this work, especially with the absolute value thrown into it. It's just hard to do things in your head anymore. You have got to learn the steps. Okay, so the main difference between this problem and the other problem is that look what was between it up here. A plus sign. So I was adding 3 to this quantity. Here I'm taking this quantity and multiplying it by 12. First thing you need to know is this does not mean distribute. It does not mean multiply the 12 by everything. Don't do that. These lines are straight. They mean absolute value. Those lines are curvy. Let's multiply those, right? So what does it mean when there's no sign there? It's being what? Multiplied still, right? What's the opposite of multiplying? Dividing. So I want to get rid of that 12 first. And when I do, I'm left with a negative 4 plus 2x equals 3. And then I ask myself, is everything cleaned up? Everything out of the way? Anything in front? Anything behind? Nope, we're good to go. And then, and only then, can you do your two equations. One with that quantity equaling a positive 3, and the other with it equaling a negative 3. If I'm going too fast, throw me a timeout, I'll slow down. But are you with me so far? Is it making sense? Okay, we'll do a little summary at the end. And now it's a two-step equation. This is 2-2, right? Actually, it's 2-1. Two-step equations. So here's the deal. I want to cancel out the constant first. So it's a little non-traditional in the order that it looks. And guess what? This is algebra. It's not a perfect world. Not every problem is going to give you a whole number answer. So when you get a decimal as an answer or a fraction, don't assume you did it wrong. Right? So you could leave that as 7/2. You could make it 3.5. You could make it 3.5. The answer key is probably going to say 7/2. Okay? But now I got to figure that's only one of my answers, right? The other answer is going to be 1/2. Okay? And you're going to see the answers on the answer document written like this. 7/2, comma, 1/2. Brackets are not the same as parentheses. They're not talking about an ordered pair. An ordered pair, you know, means the x value and then the y value. Don't write them like that. You don't even need these little brackets. Just list your answers as this and that. Good enough. Some people go back and circle them. Some people highlight them. You could just leave them, okay? Because you're checking your own work anyway, right? All right. So now let's combine something before and something after. So I'm combining the last two problems that I just did. Ready? So let's do this one. And this is 3 times a number over 2 plus 4 minus 15 equals 6. Do you see how they're starting to get increasingly harder? So let's talk about this. This is, I got a multiplying by 3 to get rid of and a subtracting 15 to get rid of. And you know when you solve equations, you are undoing things, right? So you're going in reverse order from the order of operations. And usually in order of operations, what's done last? The adding and subtracting. So if we're going in reverse order, like from the bottom of that pyramid up, okay, we're doing addition and subtraction first. Because everything's backwards when you solve an equation, right? So get rid of that first. That leaves you with your 3 and your a over 2 plus 4 equaling 21. And right before adding and subtracting on order of operations comes multiplication and division. So you'll get rid of that next. And I can't do anything until everything is cleared out. So I cleaned a few things up. Sometimes you got to just clear one, sometimes you got to clear two, and now it's good to go. Following me? Okay? So now I can set this as a over 2 plus 4 could equal a positive 7, and a over 2 plus 4 could equal a negative 7. Just keeping in mind that every single problem that you do will be set equal to a positive version and a negative version. I mean, you could see me go back and you could see the positive 8 and a negative 8. You need to have that in every one of your equations. You can color code it if you want, as long as you know to make one positive, one negative. Okay? I put this problem here on purpose because I want to make sure we understand, because we're still getting confused on what to cancel first. This is the constant, so get rid of this. A over 2 is equal to 3, And now I multiply by 2, right? So that's 6, which means I'm going to do the same thing here. And multiply this. So I'm flying through this, right? Because we covered this. Okay, so your answers are positive 6 and negative 22. All right. I want to do this one next. Because this is the one that you guys get confused with. This one. When the whole expression is over this versus when the whole expression or the variable is just over that. So first of all, this 3 is no part of this absolute value. Otherwise, it would be the whole thing, right? So that's what I have to clear out. What's the opposite of dividing by 3? Multiplying both sides by 3, right? For that exact purpose. Go ahead. Never mind? Okay. All right, let me know if you change your mind. Good so far? Is everything gone from in front? Check. From behind? Check. Now I set my 2 equations up. 6 minus x could equal a positive 36, but it could also equal a negative 36. And I purposely set this problem up because cancel the constant, right? So negative x, we're dropping a lot of these negative x's. Some of us don't know what to do with the variable doesn't have a coefficient in front. It does. It's a negative 1. You just can't see it. So your answer is not done. Some of you left it like that on your 2-1 test. Variable needs to be by itself. Got it? So now when you can finish this. We can finish it together. Negative x is equal to negative 42. Are you getting more comfortable with solving these equations? Hopefully. All right. Negative 30, positive 42. It's a lot, I know. But I feel like the more examples you see, the more you'll be equipped to deal with them. Yep. Basically, exactly what we're doing is we're figuring out, by the time we get all to the bottom of it, we're figuring out what the x could be. And I'm so glad you said that because, you can check your answers easily, right? By going and putting in negative 30 there. So just do a quick check. If I did 6 minus negative 30, took the absolute value of that, divided it by 3, I should get 12, right? So if I were to do 6 plus 30 is what? 36. What's the absolute value of 36? And is 36 divided by 3 12? Yep. You always have that option to check. And it's a good option to use, right? Okay, let's try another one. And then this is our last regular example, and then we're going to have 2 special cases. So let's do 3 minus 2x minus 8 equals 12. And you've seen this before. You've seen it like this. Okay? And what does having a minus there really mean? It's a negative 1. But what do you get rid of first? This 3 is positive, so you want to get rid of this first, right? That's going to give you negative 2x minus 8 equals 9. I'm not done, though, because everything is not cleared yet. It looks like it is, but just like I don't distribute, I get rid of it, right? That's going to affect your answer, okay? And then this is going to actually lead me into something that I didn't anticipate here, but watch. So this is going to leave you with 2x minus 8 equals negative 9. And I'm going to stop right there because this is my very next example. So leave that right here for now and just kind of scooch down here and write special cases. Special cases means something a little kooky happens. And we have it on every single lesson, and it always makes us go, that's not what normally happens. What do I do? So special case number 1 is exactly what happened right here. If I were to say to you, hey guys, give me a value of A that I could put right there, that would make this work. What did we just talk about 10 minutes ago? absolute value cannot be negative. When the only time it can be negative is if there's like a negative on the outside. So no matter how long and how hard you sat, could you come up with a number that you could put in there that has an absolute value of -3? No. Because absolute value is defined as distance, and distance can never be negative. So you know what happens when you can't think of a number to make an answer work? What do we put? No solution. Boom. Easy. Okay? So, after I clear everything out, if the number right here is a negative, do I even have to set up two equations and work those two equations out? No, you're done. No solution. And another mistake kids will make is they forget that that problem was in the notes. And they will set up 2x minus 8 equals -9, 2x minus 8 equals +9. And then wonder why they get it wrong. It's because there is no solution, because no matter what you put in there, none of it's going to give me an absolute value of -9. Okay, however, there's always tricks out there, isn't there? So, go ahead. Sometimes I know this, that kids will kind of half listen, and they'll put no solution for this problem. And I say, why did you put no solution? I know that why they put it, but I ask them. They say, because there's a negative on the outside. But what did I say? Is step number 1, every single time, you have to do what? Clear everything that's not on the inside of the absolute value. And look what just so happens to happen when I do that. You see? When I divided by that -3, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So is this a no solution problem? Nope. You have got to do that problem. And you're going to have x plus 6 equals a +5 and x plus 6 equaling a -5. Good? Okay? So be careful of that. And then there's one more special case. And here it is. Okay? Remember how I said at the very beginning, you're almost always going to have two answers? Sometimes you'll have none, and I just showed you. Sometimes you're going to only have one. This is the last one we'll do. A plus 7 minus 6 equals -6. Okay? Clear it out. Step 1, every time. And when I clear it out here, I'm left with the a plus 7, but then they cancel out here, and I get a 0. And I'm not sure why everybody's hating on 0. Everybody's thinking as soon as a 0 pops up that the answer is no solution. Hey, if you're telling me 0 is the answer, then 0's the solution. 0 doesn't mean no solution, right? It means there is one, and it's 0. Okay? But why do you think this is only going to have one answer? Think about when I go to set my two equations up. 0 is what kind of number? It's neutral. It's not positive. It's not negative. It's Switzerland, right? It's neutral. So when I go to set my equation up and I do an a plus 7 equals 0, I'm not going to go over here and say a plus 7 equals -0. Am I? So this equation doesn't exist when that is 0. So this is an example of one of the times you're only going to have one answer instead of two. You with me? Okay? So, let's do a summary. A quick little summary. And then we're done. So the summary will say this. Step 1. Clear everything out. So clear out your terms. Clear out any terms that are not inside the absolute value symbol. Okay? Clear them out. And how do you do that? Oh, you use inverse operations. And you do the adding and subtracting first. Right? Because it's order of operations in reverse. Step 2. After everything's cleared out, Didn't I tell you to set up your two equations? Meaning make one equal to a positive value and then one of them equal to the negative value. Right? That was step 2. And then step 3, we're going to call be careful or look out, because special cases are going to pop up. And that means if it equals 0, you're only going to have how many answers? 1. Because 0 is not negative. If it equals a negative number, how many solutions are you going to have? None. Okay. Think you can do this? I have equipped you with every possible problem you are going to see on the practice problems today. So if you get stuck, all you got to do is go back to your notes, look at where the little asterisks are, and say, hey, what problem is this like? And kind of see